This podcast interview is with a colleague and friend of mine, Annie. It's an actually fascinating one. She shares with us, hot off the press, that she has literally just become a dementia doula. I didn't even know that they existed. Annie shares with us through this conversation the experiences and the navigating through the trenches of aged care and the medical system with both of her parents being diagnosed with dementia, something that is so common for so many humans. And she shares with us the highs and lows and also some of her side hustles of what got her through some of the more painful parts of her story. I hope you enjoy. The lovely Annie Harvey. It's nice to have you sitting on my couch.
Beautiful to be here.
Right next to the Christmas tree.
Yeah, very Christmas.
I know. Thank you so much for taking the time. You were on my list to share some of your thoughts and wisdom when I was deciding to do this whole project, which has taken a long time, but I'm really clear on what I want to do and why I want to do it. And I'm excited to have you as part of it. You and I go a long way back. And actually I was trying to think I don't even remember how we first connected. I mean, it's in the Adelaide scene. I think we were in business.
It's a great question.
Hubs together. I don't really know.
I didn't research that for a
No, you did not learn that. But we've got a cool story because we were a part of an event 6-7 years ago.
Yep.
Didn't really know each other very well, and we were both guest speakers at this event, and a couple of other women were as well. And the four of us have kept in contact, and we do dinners every quarter. And it's turned into this most incredible space, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah, really.
It's rare.
So I'm not sure pre that how we
No,
met.
I'm not sure. But that feels like a good start because I think the event was called The Power of Her, something like that.
Something like
and
that.
that was, I told my forgiveness story.
Yes, I remember very well. So you've got a lot of titles and a lot of, spaces that you work within. Can you just give me a rundown? Because I know a lot of them, but can you give me a rundown, I guess, of, where you find yourself professionally and personally and some of the things that you're doing before we get into the topic that I've brought you here to talk about, because you're more than just that. So tell me a little bit, tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit of the Annie story.
Where I am now.
Well, where you are now, where you've come from.
So I have had, much to my father's horror, 17 careers so far. And I say so far because I'm sure there'll be more. My dad raised me to just work for one employer for your whole life, as he did. So I've been in marketing. I have been a school teacher. I've been a tutor and a franchisee. And now I still call myself an educator.
Mm-hmm. That's very fitting.
Yeah. So I share my time speaking, keynote speaking on burnout, specifically a missing piece in burnout I think none of us talk about because no one knows what the word means, which is inefficacy. And I'm a mindfulness trainer and a laughter yoga leader without being a yoga teacher. So there's no downward dog in it. So a laughter therapist, I guess you could call me. And I'll leave my most recent career that I've started last week. It's all there at the end.
And I remember I had you as one of my guest speakers at a retreat that I held, and you came and you were very newly into the laughter yoga. And I remember feeling myself like, this is really different. And a lot of the women on the retreat were like, what is this? But it was remarkable. Do you want to tell us a little bit about laughter therapy? Because I'm all about it.
So I came across it when I was in Melbourne. I went to see the Dalai Lama speak. And in the breakout area, you could learn to do two things. Power nap. Didn't need to learn that. Very good at that. And a thing called laughter yoga. And my friend said, come on, let's give it a try. I said, I haven't got the right clothes and I'm not really into downward dog. And she said, well, doesn't matter, we can just leave. And we did this thing for half an hour and it was the most incredible thing. I felt high, like I don't really know what high on drugs feels like, but I felt like that could be that moment. And I had to kind of ground myself to go back in and watch the Dalai Lama. So I came home and both my husband and I trained to be laughter yoga leaders.
And now you actually literally travel the world doing laughter therapy, don't you?
Yeah. It's a bit of a crazy thing. It's very hard to sell as a business owner. because most people think there's yoga in it. And it was created by a medical doctor in India 40 years ago, roughly. And he was researching the power of laughter on our physical, emotional, and mental health, and created this thing called laughter yoga, which is effectively when we laugh out loud, we breathe out longer than we breathe in. So we're turning on our parasympathetic nervous system effectively and turning down that stress response. So we are all trained in the same way across the world. There's hundreds of us in how to stimulate your laughter to start with through activities and deep breathing. And then eventually, especially if you're in a group, it's just contagious and it takes off.
I've witnessed it. And I think even in what I do, I'm constantly telling people, you need to go and have fun. You need a belly laugh. Like it is time, right? And you would agree and attest to the fact that as adults, we lose the ability and the art to do joy.
To do joy. Yeah.
Do joy.
Or guilt-free joy, maybe.
Yeah. Or just good old-fashioned fun without the, I don't know. And when I tell people to go out and have fun, they all go, well, I don't know what to do.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't know what to do.
No, I think it's an incredible gift we've been given. So I'm going to a gig tomorrow in Adelaide, for example, and I will have the usual looks of horror on people's faces. Quite often, the men that are wearing suits will go, there is no way I'm joining this day, of course. And they're normally the ones that are crying with laughter on the floor by the end of it.
Yeah, right.
And the session I'm doing full 60 minutes tomorrow for a corporate gig. And only one person knows what's happening at the end of the day.
Goodness.
So I just show up and take that leap of faith and pretty much know I'll get 99% of the people joining in.
That's incredible. And so then let's move to the mindfulness coach, because you kind of launched on a TED Talk stage, didn't you?
Yes.
Very randomly, quite by accident.
It was randomly. It was part of my 50th year, doing 50 new things in my 50th year, but I didn't have a bucket list. So I had to say yes to everything that I was invited to do that year, literally everything. So my friends bought me a skydive and definitely not on my list. And I had to jump out of an aeroplane. I taught myself how to swim, ate crickets in Thailand. Whatever anyone said, I dare you, or do you want to do this? I had to say yes.
So amazing.
So I got up to about 73 things or something that year. And one of them was, why don't you play to laughter yoga as a TEDx talk? Okay, I'll apply. Might as well apply. I'm not going to get the post. And I got it. 6 minutes. And it's been my business card ever since, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It just went global.
Yeah.
Went global.
Yeah.
Okay, so a woman of many talents and so much wealth in all the different areas, but they're all related, right? All related. Moving towards a topic that I'm really excited and I want to learn from you, because I think it's something and a season and chapter in a lot of people's lives that doesn't get recognized or talked about. And that is aging parents and the caring of parents that are ill or have got a diagnosis or a health issue. And they're often humans that are caring for elderly parents are what in my world are called the sandwich generation, right? Because they're caught between, in a good way, it's not bad, but caught between caring, like the circle of life, but also having their own lives, right? Professions, marriages, kids, all the things. And it can be really hectic. And I've had plenty of clients sit opposite me and also friends that, you know, the weight is a lot, right? And there's no roadmap for it. And I know you and I, obviously, because we've got history, I sat with you over many coffees and, you know, learnt about your beautiful parents who at different stages were diagnosed with the same thing.
Yes.
So are you open to, I guess, sharing, first of all, a little bit about your mum and dad, right? And also maybe the beginning stages of their diagnosis and the impact and the what do we do now kind of scenario.
Yeah. And actually, thank you for asking me to introduce them, because it's those bits, it's like the glimmers I was talking about, the bits, the good bits I forget about very often. So we came to Australia in 2006, just for 2 years. I'm an only child. We were going back to be near my parents. And they came out for a holiday 6 months into our trip, had a few too many wines one night and said, I think we're going to move here. We can see that you're only going back to the UK for us. I'm like, you're drunk, go to bed, like sleep on it. Next night, same thing happened. And sure enough, 6 months later, they upped at the age of 80.
I mean, it's wild.
And left, well, they didn't leave anything behind. They shipped their entire life across the seas to Australia.
But they left their roots, right?
Their
Roots,
everything.
everything.
Huge. And, hindsight's a great thing. It's a big thing they did, a really big thing.
Yeah.
I now know that Dad only ever did it for Mum. He didn't really want to do it, but he knew that she wanted to be near me. And with everything that happened, thank goodness that they were near and not on the other side of the road, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So they were here at 80. What were their names other than Mum and Dad?
Michael and Peggy.
Michael and Peggy, love that. So they were in their 80s. How many years in Australia did they have that were good before they started, I guess, getting unwell?
Mum had about 4, I guess, 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I was trained to be a teacher at the time. She had a diagnosis of lung cancer when I was trying to be a teacher. And she, being the age that she was, she refused all treatment. She was a very proud lady. I don't want my hair to fall out. I'm just going to beat this somehow. Mind over matter, I'm just going to ignore it. And it didn't get any worse, which is quite incredible. She was called the miracle woman in Flinders Hospital for quite a few years. And then I started to notice that things were changing about 4 years later. And in 2012, she was diagnosed with one of what is many forms of dementia. There's 150 forms of dementia, which I certainly didn't know at the time.
Is that for real? 150?
Yep, it's for real. Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and name them all.
No, wait. I'm going to test you on it.
Alzheimer's is obviously the most common one that people know of, and that's what she was diagnosed with after some MRIs and everything else in about 2012.
Wow. And I'm always curious, and I hope this is okay to ask, but what was it like, I guess, for you and for your dad and for your mum in that diagnosis? Because I'm assuming she was still, semi-well. Like she understood the diagnosis. It's not like she crossed over, right? What was that little season like? Like what was the emotion around it? What was the challenges? What were some of the high points, the low points?
I'd say it was a pretty wintry season or autumnal season, probably, mainly because, and this quite often happens, is Dad was in complete denial of it. So didn't believe any of the diagnosis, wouldn't remind Mum to take her medication, etc. And knew that had to start looking after her, but really he was in complete denial. So, I'll never know what that really meant to him, whether he actually knew what was going on and was terrified, or he really didn't believe. He was quite stubborn. And I think he thought, I've brought it to the other side of the world. We're just going to do whatever we need to do.
And we're certainly not doing dementia.
No. One of his friends had Parkinson's, and quite a lot of people who have Parkinson's also have dementia. And one of his friends had dementia through Parkinson's back in the UK. And Dad pretty much just ditched this mate. It was a stigma, like I can't hang around with someone who has, anger issues. And it was all part of this behaviour, as they call it. It's actually a horrible word to go with the different symptoms. So I think he saw what had happened to his friend and thought, well, that's not my wife. She's not presenting like that. So we're not going to talk about it and just get on with life.
Yeah, wow. What was that like for you? Because you weren't in denial, or were you?
No, I was pretty clear what was going on.
Okay.
It was a really, I felt very helpless at the time because I could research. So I could research and get all the tools and all the connections that Mum and Dad would need, but of course Dad wouldn't take any of them. So, like we got Meals on Wheels, so Mum wouldn't have to, and Dad used to just score it out of 10 and then pretty much hand it back to the people still with food in the next day.
Oh, wow.
It was, so I researched and I took my mum to her GP for regular checkups, and she said, she was also my GP, and she said, how are you looking after you, Annie? And I don't think I heard the end of the sentence. So I didn't answer her, and she asked again. And I said, all right, I haven't got time for that. And that's, I'm not a living carer, but I might as well be carer for both of them. And she said, well, when are you going to get some time off? I said, no, might get some respite for Mum next year, maybe. And she said, why don't you try this thing called mindfulness? Apparently it's very good. This was in 2012. Downloaded an app, went home, downloaded an app, and learned to walk actually, is what I did for 3 minutes, 3 times a week, just to start off with. And, I tell this story a lot, but what it allowed me to do is Mum's dementia presented as repeating her memories that she could remember, which was when she was 9 years old. And she'd say it at this point 20 times in one conversation. And I say that I had, rage and grief and anger and frustration, everything racing through me in these conversations, with Dad getting really cross with her sitting in the background. Especially when she put her credit cards in the freezer. That was quite a common thing. She told the story, and I still had all these big feelings racing through me, but somehow I had this skill where I could allow them to be there, could ground myself. And the Buddhists, I'm not a Buddhist, but the Buddhists would say beginner's mind. So I heard her story like it was the first time, even though it was 20 times in one conversation. So I think, I really gave Mum the gift of listening, and that's a gift we want to give everybody, really, isn't it?
Oh, of course, but that's really beautiful, because I would imagine that repetitive, space can just in the natural is frustrating.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is.
But you can recognize that, it's not them, you're right, but having to stay in that space over and over again. It sounds like mindfulness, had played a huge role in you being able to cope, I guess.
Yeah.
And get through it.
Yeah. It did. And that's when I came across laughter yoga in pretty much the same time.
Okay.
So I had my own tools to process, to regulate, even though I couldn't really help Mum and Dad at the time, because Dad was still almost not living near the house because he didn't want to talk about this thing. He didn't want to, we could take Mum out to different groups. So I went to the groups on my own. She was never allowed to come with me. So I was doing all the research behind the scenes and all the stuff to help me, because I knew, the oxygen mask thing, I decided I did need to, bit of a cliche, but look after myself so I could be there for them when they eventually needed it.
What was the one thing, I guess, that you learned about dementia? Because as you said, there's 150 versions, but what did you learn about it? Like, what's the biggest, in reflection, what's the biggest take home?
I guess I've learnt so much since, because Dad went on to also be diagnosed with different forms. So his form was Lewy bodies dementia, which means that he had hallucinations. And, if you fast forward to the years when his last year in care, he would look outside and see in that tree out there maybe 10 guys smoking cigars.
Wow.
And for the first few times I'd go in, and of course you say, well, there's no people in the trees, Dad. And then you go, well, he's happy, he's safe, he feels safe, he's not scared of them. They're his friends. So I just entered into that conversation. So every day I would go in and I'd ask if they're there. And, where were the cigars from? Did they come from Cuba? What colour the hats he was wearing? And we just talked for a good hour about these people in a tree.
Wow.
But he also had scary hallucinations too. Aeroplanes taking off from the hospital roof, and he literally could see them. So I learned that it's more than just forgetting things, I guess. And what I learned probably a year in, and I wished I'd known it sooner, was that most people that have any form of dementia still feel their emotions. So they still feel sadness, but they can still feel joy. And I didn't know that. And I don't think many people know that. They think it's, if the mind has gone, then everything else must have gone, but it hasn't.
Because, the only experience I've had was with a great auntie, and it felt like she just forgot everything. But when I don't know if this is the right terminology, so please tell me if I'm wrong. It's almost like when she crossed over into happy land, like there wasn't that struggle and wrestle of, because she'd always say to me, oh, no, I didn't mean that. I knew, because she was aware. Yeah, they pick themselves up on it. And I think that I always used to feel really sad for her in that space, because it was like her mind was still there, but then it had shades and moments where it wasn't.
Yeah.
So it's that oscillating between the two. And I remember when I said she crossed over to actually not remembering anything. we were sad, but I remember the nurses and the care staff be like, she's actually happy. Like there's no rest.
Yeah. And someone described it the other day as like a filing cabinet where the last thing you put in your filing cabinet is the first thing out. So if you literally visualize that, then, Mum's memories of 9 years old were right at the back of that filing cabinet, but that's what she could remember. Those were happy memories. Most of them, as far as I know, were true. It's not like she was making them up. But towards the end of Dad's life, he thought I was Mum, which was quite an interesting period to go through, and a realization that Mum was beautiful. She was a great lady. So actually, this is quite an honour that that's who I am.
Yeah.
And I just went with it.
So how long did your mum, like from diagnosis till she passed away?
About 5 years.
And was she in care in the end, or she stayed home?
Luckily, I say just for a couple of weeks. Yeah. But we had this incident, which I know you remember, of my dad still in denial stage of, let's take Mum on a little holiday back to the UK. So that was in 2014. And that's when I had to kind of say, well, I need to step up. So I started getting GPs involved. I went to see a solicitor to see whether I could put some kind of stop on him taking her away, because, all the medical staff were saying she needs to be near where she lives. She needs to be where she knows. And he wouldn't have anything of it. So wouldn't want me to travel either. And yeah, had a pretty traumatic couple of years after that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want that story?
Sure. I mean, I think the specific story is really significant. I remember it.
Yeah. So I saw them off at Adelaide Airport and got a call the next morning from a guy saying, I've got your mum here. She thinks she's in Adelaide. I'm actually calling from Hong Kong Airport. Of course, Mum didn't carry a little thing to say I have dementia in her purse. And they told me that Dad had had a heart attack and a stroke on the escalator going between flights back to London, and he'd gone off one way in an ambulance, and Mum was there with Qantas basically waiting for me to go and pick her up. And that was, you can imagine the fear of that, but also the anger of my dad insisting that that's what was going to happen, when we never dreamt that something would actually happen to him.
Yeah.
Which we now know was the start of his journey of dementia too. But we didn't know that at the time.
So that flight to Hong Kong must have been horrific.
Yeah, it was. I put a thing out on Facebook just before I got on the flight. If anyone knows anyone in Hong Kong who can find my mum, lock her in a hotel room with British tea and biscuits. I'll be there as soon as I can. And we found someone.
No way.
Yeah. In fact, I caught up with her yesterday, ironically, last night. I hadn't seen her for a couple of years. And that's where my mum stayed until I could go and see her, make sure she was safe, then go and find Dad in one of 5 or 6 hospitals he'd been in. And that started on a journey where once we got him home, so we closed a business. I stayed over there for about 3 weeks. Once we got him home out of hospital, he was, and again, this was part of dementia, but now I know, I think he'd had a dream where I had stolen all his money. So in his reality, in his world, that's what had happened.
Oh, wow.
So he literally cut me off for a good 18 months, I suppose.
As in would not speak to you?
No, I could only see Mum if I picked her up at the end of the road. So he'd watch to make sure she got to the end of the road safely and I could take her out for coffee. And that was it. Yeah, it was a very, very weird time.
How did you navigate that?
I came to see you. And I tell a lot of people that because I don't remember when it was in the whole journey. I don't remember how I came across you. I knew you before that. Mm-hmm. But I remember standing there and saying, I can't live with the guilt of this. And I tell so many people this story, and I'm sure I could be very rich so I could remember what you did. But I do remember you getting this massive whiteboard and writing the word guilty, or you covered the whole board. I was like, yeah, what you doing? That's the word I'm feeling. And you just went, so tell me what you've done wrong. And I couldn't answer. It still takes me back now. I still don't know, right? You literally stopped me in your tracks. And I realised I hadn't done anything wrong, And if I was going to keep going on that, it would turn into shame and everything else. And it was a pretty life-changing morning, sat on that other sofa.
I do remember. And I think for me, what struck me, I remember how the meeting came about. We knew each other, but you rang me and said, look, I need to just detangle. And I said, come in, not as a client, come in. I've got a whiteboard. Like, let's just chat. And I remember very specifically that you were so, I guess, what I would call tangled in this space of grief, guilt, and overwhelm. But the guilt was the biggest thing that kept coming up. And I think it's important for us to talk about, because I think you know more than I know, because I haven't lived your journey. But anyone going through a chapter with elderly parents that are challenging. I mean, you got cut off for 18 months and like that's challenging. All due to a diagnosis that hadn't happened yet, you know. There's guilt lands really quickly. It's almost sometimes the biggest and the quickest thing that lands.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because as adult kids, you know, I think a lot of us feel this privilege to take care, right? But also overwhelmed, don't know what we're doing, right? And certainly with your dad's, I guess, journey, you know, his erratic decision making and cost you. And you couldn't change it. It's not like you could sit down and let's hash this out. I'm sorry, you're sorry. What did I do? This was actually, as you said, a hallucination dream that changed the direction of your life.
Yeah.
You know, so I do remember that. So I guess leaning more into that for you, obviously that all turned around and you came back into relationship with dad. Was that prior to mum passing?
Yes, that was my 50th birthday.
Okay.
So I was singing in a choir for the Tutsi choir and went out for dinner and was talking about, I was like, I haven't spoken to my dad for 18 months. This is insane. And I'm 50 tomorrow. Maybe it was a couple of days later. And she said, oh, I can sort that out. Okay. She said, come and have some tapping with me. Now, I'm not turning this into a tapping podcast, but she did something to me that day that allowed me to phone dad and say, could I take you out for lunch today for my birthday? And they both showed up.
Wow.
What
was that lunch like?
It was awkward, I think, because unfortunately dad was still in the denial stage with mum. So he'd bought her a gift and she'd lost it that morning. So he spent the whole lunchtime kind of telling her off for losing this thing. But it was a relief, I think, more than anything. Yeah. And I don't know what this woman did. She just did a little bit of tapping on my forehead and I was able to reframe the relationship, I think. I'd also gone to a meditation retreat in Thailand earlier that year. So I was there for a friend's wedding to do laughter yoga at my friend's wedding in Thailand.
Oh, okay. What, at the reception or?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And at the meditation retreat, we had to learn this thing called a love and kindness meditation, which has a bit of a woo-woo term, really. But effectively, it's to know that all deep down, majority of humans want to be safe, happy, and healthy. So we had to send wishes to people we loved in our mind, send wishes to the room, try and send those wishes to ourselves, which is hard sometimes, particularly as women, I think. And then send those wishes to someone we had a challenge with. And I couldn't even say those words in my head for maybe 6 months. It wasn't like a couple of days' time I tried it again. No. So once I was able to do that and reframe it and, you know, write that talk about forgiveness, it's not that the forgiveness journey was about, you know, not saying that he did anything right. It was about me being able to move on and not get so stuck. And I never said out loud, I forgive him. And actually until his last hours, which I've only just reminded of, I said that. I did actually do that. Yeah. Who knows whether he could hear me or not, but it was important that I said.
I'm sure he could.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is a huge topic, isn't it? We could talk about that for hours. Did you, if you don't mind me asking, was it more around forgiving your dad or forgiving dementia coming into your life?
What a great question.
Or both?
Oh, I don't know if if I'd forgiven dementia. No, I don't think, because it then went on with him as well. No, I think it was more about an understanding more of dementia, in that he was a very proud man, but I think how he behaved, if you want to call it that word, was down to the dementia, which I didn't realize at the time.
That's what I mean. It's hard to separate them, because I would imagine it feels like one and the same.
And also stories. I mean, you know, in his last year, we'd have conversations when he thought I was his wife, which was a little strange, but you know, the whole thing with him thinking or dreaming that I'd stolen money. He was my bank manager from the age of 15, and as I grew right up into an adult in real life. I let him be my bank manager towards the end of his life too. So there was always a thing about money and shutting the door on money, and money was a secret thing. And, you know, ironically, he didn't really teach me very well at all, actually, how to manage money. And in his last few weeks, he told me a story about when he was a teenager and his mum was in debt to the local grocer, and his job was to pay the debt off with cash in a brown paper bag hidden under his coat. Every week he'd have to take this money. So that's a massive story for my dad to tell in his early 90s.
Yeah, well,
to actually explain all the money phobias and all sorts of things that went.
So it was almost like there was always a money issue in his life, or he was quite ruled by money in his healthy years.
Yep.
But then as dementia kicked in, it kind of went on steroids.
It went on steroids, but he also couldn't count. And that was a really sad day, seeing, you know, he couldn't count the change in his hand, and he'd gone from bank manager to that. So luckily someone said, well, I didn't get some Monopoly money out. And he genuinely thought it was real. So I'd take him shopping with the Monopoly money. And
but yeah, that, and I sit here and I go, oh gosh, like as a daughter.
Well, I've learned very recently around the Montessori principles of working with people with dementia. It is actually a thing. There's training you can do on it.
Right.
So I was probably doing that without even realizing it. So it was a sensory experience for him to have, even though it's plastic money. The paper felt real to him.
Yeah, well.
And he was engaged in conversations, because it was taught often in the bottle shop in his wheelchair, which was a hilarious memory. He was allowed to spend it. People in shops are really great as well. That was quite surprising, because I didn't run 5 minutes ahead and say, "We're coming in with some Monopoly money."
Yeah, okay. People just went
with it. Yeah, so he could engage, and then he would talk about the stories of, you know, who he was bank manager for in his early 30s and 40s, and so it was a big story in his life.
Big story.
I'm just sad I had to wait till I was, 50 something.
And so your mum passed away, and then it was you and your dad, right? By that stage, had your dad's dementia kind of ramped up, or was it held up back?
Not in his eyes. So then he wanted to go back to the UK again. But this time he allowed me to go with him. So it was in his 90th year. We did 4 massive trips. We went on a cruise together. We went across the Ghan to Perth. And he was like, now I'm going to spend all my money.
Yeah.
And have 4 amazing trips, actually. We went to the Great Barrier Reef, and on a cruise, Mum hated water, so she would never go on boats or anything like that. So he'd always want us to do those kinds of things.
I mean, that's pretty precious.
It is.
I'm sure it was not easy, though.
No.
And how long was it before you navigated getting him into aged care facility?
We got some help at home to start with, so that was interesting, because again, as I'm sure I will be and we will be, is don't need any help, can do it all by myself. I only lived a few minutes away, so we kind of tricked him, I guess, in that we said, well, how about we get someone to help in the garden? And he said, could I still cut the grass? I'm like, absolutely, you can still cut the grass, but we'll get someone to, use the shears for the trees and stuff. So that was the route into him enjoying somebody coming every week that he could chat to as well.
Yeah.
Then eventually, and it's interesting because when we were looking for care for my mum, and even though she only was in home for 2 weeks, whereas Dad was there for 2 years, the best piece of advice I ever got from this wonderful Irish woman was look for the garden, not the chandelier.
Mm.
So that's where they will be spending their money. If there are chandeliers hanging in reception, then that's how they spend their money. It's your choice if you want to send, but look
If you
for
like
that.
chandeliers, I guess. Yeah.
It's such simple advice, but so powerful.
I mean, you and I both know, because we obviously now work in the industry in different perspectives, but I mean, for families or humans trying to navigate choosing a facility, getting into a facility, navigating the finance of, I mean, it is stressful.
Yeah.
And having to, leave family homes of 10, maybe not in your case, but sometimes people are leaving their home after 50, 60 years. Was that a grief for you, putting him into a home? There was a grief.
It was a relief, but definitely a grief, because he was quite aggressive towards the decision physically. But as soon as we got there, he asked where the rugby pitch was and could he have his rugby ball out. He was back at school as soon as he arrived.
Wow.
And that went up and down for the first year or so. But yeah, it was definitely. I mean, they talk about dementia as different forms of grief. So, is it complicated grief, anticipatory grief, ambiguous grief? There's all sorts of names out there, because you're grieving the people that they were, that you can never get back, but they're still there in front of you.
And how did you navigate this with Mark, your husband, right? Because I would imagine there was huge impact just on your personal life, right? You would have been, I'm not going to say all consumed by this, but a big chunk, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was. And I think, people say, I'm an only child, and I've, apart from the fact that I'm not very good at sharing, it's the only time in my life where I wished I'd had siblings to talk to offload, to just share the load with.
Make decisions with.
However,
some people would say you don't want
that. Well, that's exactly right. I didn't have to share that decision with anyone. I bounced ideas off people. But in the end, it was my decision, which were massive decisions, but there was no argument at all with anyone else other than Dad. So
this is where, for families, because it's a crisis, right? Families, and I see it all the time. I mean, they just internally implode, explode.
Yeah.
On top of what's already happening. It's really sad, but it's I get it. It's hard. So, but yeah, I would imagine that step. But once he was in, you knew that it was right for him and he was better off.
Yeah. And, Mark, my husband, was incredible. And then we would, I guess how we dealt with this, we'd escape camping quite a bit once we knew he was safe. And
had a little bit more freedom, did you feel?
Yes, although I did visit every day for the first few months, and then a few times a week. And then I realised, we got to a stage where I'd leave it for 2 weeks and he'd say, but I only saw you yesterday. Then that was like permission to go, okay, this isn't cruel if I only go every few weeks now. So yeah, lots of escapes to nature. And, I learnt a lot around self-compassion, which again is a thing I teach people, and it's about how you practice kindness towards yourself. But it's also around, I would have people saying, but I only saw your dad last week and he looks fine. Are you sure he's got dementia? Lots of people would say that.
Really?
So you kind of found out who your friends were.
It's really unhelpful.
Because there is a stigma around it. And because it's not just around memory, if they've come shopping with you and they've walked okay and they've remembered.
And they've said, hi, Lisa, nice to see you again. Pitch,
okay.
Yeah. 150, that still blows my mind. Versions.
Yeah.
Because I think even for me, my default is memory loss. But I mean, yeah.
No, lots more. And it's, there's some stats out recently, 440,000 people in Australia have it. Those are the ones that have been diagnosed. There's many people live in the community that won't have the diagnosis. And they reckon that's going to double by 2050. There's some big figures out there. And golly, if we could solve it on this podcast as to, cure it, we'd be very rich.
I know, but I think what you're doing, you're not solving it, and I want to come to the next part, is what you have done and are doing within, I guess, the niche of dementia and working with families is solving it. It's just a different version.
Yeah.
Right? We're not solving the disease, but you're plugging holes and, so I would say, saving lives, to be honest. So do you want to share, I guess, your most recent, very exciting news of the new version of what you're going to be doing?
Well, I think my driver for doing these new things is around my own brain health. I'm a little bit paranoid about going the same way, to be honest. So I will do everything to look after. We all have different parts that we want to look after. Mine is around brain health.
Yeah.
But also in that space, so that if I do have to go into aged care one day, that it's right and it's okay by the time I get there, kind of thing. I'm not going to say better, because some places are amazing. So I had this opportunity to do some training recently where I was effectively writing wellbeing units for the training, but I needed to go through the training to see what it was all about. And so I'm now, or will be very soon when I finish the assignments, a certified dementia doula. DOULA.
I mean, it sounds very fancy,
isn't it?
I know. I when I hear the word doula, I think midwife, right?
Yes.
So explain, dumb it down for me. What is it?
So a dementia doula is someone that's, I guess, is filling a gap or filling a service that wasn't there for me. I think that's the best way of explaining it. So I didn't want to ask for help. I didn't want to look for support. It was all about my parents. It wasn't about me. I haven't got dementia. So it was all about getting stuff for them. This is around providing connection, information, services, support for the families. So amazing. Like me, or whatever, whether that's, and that could be with someone who has childhood dementia. That is a thing that we don't really talk about.
Yeah.
Young onset dementia, which is anyone under the age of 65 and then over 65. So I've had a couple of friends, partners have passed in the last 5 years from young onset dementia as well. So I've just become, I guess it's driven my, passion's not the right word, but my interest in it.
I'd say purpose.
Yes.
It feels like a purpose for you.
Yeah, it is. And
you want to be a change maker in the industry. And I love that about you.
So it's around supporting families. So an example would be, let's go back to me, and my dad is on his own at home. So I am finding, as the doula, finding Annie the support and the connections for her, preparing her for what's coming, preparing her even for a conversation about end of life, creating a memory box for Dad that he can have at home and then take in to the home with him. And the great thing about it, the ripple effect will be advocating for that person, advocating for the families, and really actually subconsciously training the staff in the care homes as well, because these incredible carers don't actually have any training really in dementia. Yeah. So, quite often they see it as a behaviour. And, Mum had one behaviour, which was beautiful and gentle, and Dad had a very different behaviour in care.
And they get judged, right? Because we get judged by behaviour all through life, no matter what the journey is.
Yeah. And what I learnt in this training is it's not a behaviour, it's a response to something they're scared about. It's a response like any of us have, except they're in a heightened state all the time.
And it's not manageable for them, right?
Definitely not manageable.
Right.
No.
So,
because that pattern to regulate is mismatched in their brain. Yeah.
Yeah, well.
So yeah, to work with the families, I feel really proud to say that out loud. I haven't said it out loud very much yet. So
it's new. You did it last week, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like for you, all roads have led to this, and I think your personal experience with your knowledge and education and your constant avid learner, I know that about you. You're always learning. Is going to be such a blessing to families, and that's why I wanted to have you on here as well, because I think there's people that are watching this that don't even know this is going to be part of their future. And I hope that they remember this and they come and hunt you down, because they're going to need a nanny, right? Where it's like, what do we do? Because you had the daughter in you who just went into overdrive, but also the woman in you and the wife in you, all trying to navigate also a medical system, which you and I both know is I'm grateful for the medical system, but it's very foiled.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this is going to be amazing. And it's going to be, you mentioned to me earlier, it's going to be subsidized by NDIS or
Yes, be part of care and packages as well in the future, because
so it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
People don't have to come up with the resources. It's available.
And there's about, 15 of us trained so far. Hopefully, when somebody comes back, one of your listeners in a few years' time, there'll be hundreds of us. That's your aim.
Hope so. It's so needed. I think it's such a beautiful space. And I love the fact that people will get to sit with you, and because you're so knowledgeable as well around the grief story, because I think for any diagnosis in any family, right, grief, has a root system that the average person, and I don't mean, but the average person doesn't get. And so I feel like I just have this incredible sense that you're going to be the person that goes in and helps with their gardening.
That's what I hope. And I did learn something quite significant in the training, which, you can cut this part out if you want. I'm not going to go into detail, but I was at the end of my mum's life with her and my aunt and my dad. My aunt had dementia as well in the UK. And there was a certain thing that presented in all three of them, and it came up during the training, and I see it as a very traumatic memory. It has been completely reframed, not what they were actually going through is complete relaxation. Now, if someone called Annie had told me that, had given 6 months, 12 months, 2 weeks before that, my last few years since they passed would be very, very different.
Because you've been trying to work through the trauma.
That particular end-of-life experience, which happens to a lot of people, but not on movies, by the way.
No, never on movies.
So that was, it was worth doing it just for that, and to pass those things on. I think what they're saying about doulas is that we're not medical, we're not personal care, we're compassionate care. And,
which is what's missing, right?
Yeah.
Which is what's often missing. And I think knowledge is one thing, but nurture and compassion is another, it is a completely different thing. And I think the blending of that with you is going to be incredible. So I'm really proud of you and I'm excited. And yeah, I'm really hopeful that there's going to be one person listening to this that goes, oh my gosh, I need her number, or we'll pass it on, because yeah, it's going to be a gift.
Better get my business cards.
Yes, you do. Get them ready to roll. So I can't thank you enough. As I said at the very beginning, I was really keen to learn and understand the dynamics, and just to hear your story. Obviously, I've heard a bit of it over the years, but just to hear your story and the courage that it's taken, I think. And I think for anyone walking through this, no matter what's happening in their world, courage is profound. But courage doesn't mean, and I say this all the time, that we're strong, right? It can be snot bubble crying in the corner. And I know that there's been a lot of times and moments in your life where courage has looked not like society would think it should look. I think of you on that plane to Hong Kong and the paralyzing fear that must have been, that took courage to even sit there, is profound. So thank you.
I wanted to thank you for the whiteboard experience. Because I come back to it all the time.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's interesting, isn't it, for you and for me? As I said, I still remember what I was wearing. I remember where we were. I remember getting up there and just writing this word, but not knowing if I was going to nail it. But it was just this space of, that's all I keep hearing, even in the unspoken. And if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, you'd come back from Hong Kong, like you'd had that experience, and I remember sitting listening to it going, what? How does that happen? Like it's from a movie.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Literally. I might write a book. I might write it into...
You should.
Into a work... It's not going to be a self-help book or self-help book. It's going to be a work of fiction, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it really is unbelievable. Anyway, thank you. And Doula Annie, all the way.
All the way.